at some point in our life, we want to know who we are connected to, who we are related to. And that's when we start searching up family trees, relations, cousins, brothers, grandparents, sisters, nieces, nephews. Today with me is a rather interesting person, not an author, but someone who's done so much work online. His name is Fausto de Sa. He's based in London, in the UK. And Fausto, tell us about your interest in genealogy. I know you're all over the place and you've done so much about it. And once we start talking, the audience will know how much you know. So tell us.
Well, the thing is, I got involved in family history is because I'm an only child. My parents were elderly. And so what happened was my mother and father, they instilled a lot of family values, and I had cousins and stuff. So when, as a child, I made 2 trips to Goa. And so during those trips I was 6 and 10, but I was taken across to, we were staying in Asagaon, but I would go to Lotoli, Kurtori, Benauli, everywhere where we had relatives.
Do the family circuit.
To meet all the great aunts and great grand aunts and all that. And that was the way it was. And then so when I went back to Karachi, where I was born, my mother, of course, was a Portuguese speaker all her life. She grew up in Goa, in fact not far from here, she lived in opposite Masanda Amori School on 18 June Road. And so she used to talk about her life in Panjim. She was always most sought after to go for the medical school balls, and she used to fire names, and these names were like known to me, even though I didn't know these people, never met them. They were like of a different generation, but my mother used to tell me these names.
So you grew up in the diaspora and you were actually keeping track of all of this and
so it was all going into my head and nothing else was happening with it. It was in 2004 that I came with my mother to Goa, and I went and visited my wife actually. I was married that time. So I'd come to Goa, and I went to visit a relative of mine who used to live also not far from here. His name was Irish Perish the Costa. He used to be, I think, involved with the government printing press. So he gave me a couple of family trees. So I took that back with me, and nothing happened. And he put me in contact with a person called Pedro Costa, who is a nephew of Dr. Adelia Costa.
Yeah.
So he kind of gave me a sort of a family tree of my mother's side, and father's side also he gave me a kind of a family tree which he had. So I still I just kept all those papers. It was in the summer, sometime in the 2007, 2008, when Portugal appointed Antnio Santos da Costa as the mayor of Lisbon. His family tree came up on the site.
On Genie.com?
Not Genie, on the newspaper.
Okay.
So somebody sent me a cutting of that. And what I did identify was right up there somewhere was a similar name to what was on my tree.
I see.
So I was intrigued. I said, there's something interesting going on here. So in 2009, I was at a lunch party. And by that time, I had already been given these invites to join this group called Genie.com. And I just
but I want to interrupt you here. I mean, it's a fascinating story about your own family tree, but I want to emphasize that your search, while the family tree is important and we'll go into it in more detail, your search doesn't restrict itself to your family alone. You went to Genie and you've done thousands maybe of links to Goan families, and that's how you put the jigsaw together. Carry on.
I'll tell you about what that is exact. So I'll just finish that thing. So in 2009, his friend told me about this Genie.com. So I got intrigued. So I went there, and whatever information I had, I just put it into that system, and it just started throwing me links to other families because people had put their details, and it was connecting me. So suddenly, within like weeks, I suddenly had, from having about 150 people on my family tree, I suddenly ended up with about 2,000. And these are, and most of it was information my mother had told me over the years that this one is connected. But I said, Mom, how? I don't know. They just said, call me Tia, call me Prima, call me this. And I said, but what is the connection? She just did not have answers.
So Genie had the answers for you?
Genie gave me the answers.
How does Genie work, and
Genie
you have to pay for it? Or?
Genie works in a way that each person goes into it and he puts whatever information he has. But what has happened is, I think, as you know, in any organized thing, they have to generate income. So they've started, you can add up to 100 names for free. But then I think they kind of have a subscription where you join and have subscription. So you get a bit more facilities. You can complete merges. So what happens is, if say X or Y, they have put their family tree, I am there, I've put mine. I can interact with X and say, hey, we've got a connection up here. Why don't we kind of do the connection? So then if they accept my offer, we can go ahead and do the connection. And that's how it's collaboration. It's connections, collaboration, and all that
online. Very easy to connect. And of course, the site is geni.com.
It is geni.com.
But sorry, I interrupted you when you were telling this interesting thing of how you completed your own family tree. Now we know the background. You can.
So I did that, and then of course I started so my interest. I said, I've got a talent. Everyone wants to see what they can do within their life, and I said, this is something I really enjoy. I'd like doing. And of course, it's difficult for my wife, because I've actually spent 3 hours a day on it.
She's what they call an internet widow. Many of our wives are.
So I'm at 3 hours a day. I do spend on average
after work.
And I go to various websites. So anyway, many times I get calls from people, and they come and say, "Hey, what is your connection to my family? Why have you done it?" And you know what is the icebreaker I use?
What?
The icebreaker I use is treat Goan genealogy as a giant picture puzzle. Each piece is a family. The connection is, if I take this piece out of the equation, the picture is incomplete. We are all interlinked by, whether we like it or not, whether we've got family differences or whether there is some problem, whether we are all interlinked. So we have to put those pieces together.
And the 6 degrees of separation in Goa are definitely not 6. They are 1 or 2. Would you agree?
I fully agree with with the thing, because in my own friend circle, I moved to UK. I had no friends. I made friends when I went to the UK.
Which year?
In 1997. 96 I was in Portugal. 1997 I was in London. I didn't have friends because my friends were all in Canada. But when I went there, before and after marriage, I started making friends with people. But now through Genie, I've discovered some of them are my third cousins, some of them are my wife's third cousins, somebody is my second cousin, somebody is married to my second cousin, and that's how it is. It's like that, as you said, 6 degrees of separation means nothing now. And when I go for parties, people just say, all I have to see is just see 3 different people, and I will find a connection. Maybe not be a blood line, but I'll find a marriage connection through marriage connection, or somebody's uncle is married to somebody's aunt. I will find that connection.
And it's amazing because computers makes all this very easy in that sense.
It does.
So the writer Victor Angel Ribeiro one day came and said, "Hey Frederick," he said, "I'm quite embarrassed because I'm related to you of all people, like 28 links away or whatever." So he was just joking. But.
And so the thing is so a lot of the, like Victor Angel Ribeiro, you've mentioned his name. He has been very appreciative of things, because he gave me a little bit of information about his family, and he ironically is related to my wife through the Rangel, because my wife's great grandmother was a Rangel. So the printing press in Bastora is thing, but they are not originally from Bastora.
So any name I throw at you, you could find some connection, by now.
Yeah, I do. The thing is, because I've studied some villages, I even know unique surnames to that village. So for instance, like we have like Estrosio. It's a very
rare
there is it's been anglicized to Extros in the British area there. Now Estrosio I've only come across in Thivi or in Talegaon. So you do get another. Subrin, for instance, it's a very unusual name. Only Lotoli. I have not come across Subrin anywhere else. My own ancestry is Pimenta on my mom's side. I find them in Kurtori and Lotoli. So they're just the 2 Pimentas. So it's just, there are the surnames, but there are some surnames which obviously, as I told you, like the D'Souza, Fernandez are so common. But so when I start working on certain villages like Aldona or Sioli, which is, these surnames just keep, so it reaches a stage where I start getting like bored with with the names. I just go on to the next village which interests me.
As an aside, I met a friend in Portugal, and he said, "So did you find your relations here?" I said, "What?" I said, "I didn't get you." He said, "No, did you find your relations here?" I said, "See, we are local converts. We don't have any relations here." He said, "Oh, I didn't know that." He said, "Because you all Goans have the best of the Portuguese surname. Some of you all do.
Yeah.
And you know, I said we just plucked them and chose them in that sense.
Yeah, no, the thing is, it's not that only just plucking and choosing.
I was
just,
joking.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like for instance, there is one very intriguing thing in one of the families, which is this is the Alvarez family.
From where?
They are based in the Margao. So you know the family of and recent MLA Carlos Ferreira Alvarez. Now this Alvarez family have got Portuguese connections. Now the thing is that, and I'm descended from that family through a maternal line. So it's a maternal line married. DNA testing does not allow it. Now
that's another chapter in itself. We'll come to DNA testing. But sorry, carry on.
So in this particular case, for instance, there is a story. There's a book by the late Monsignor Francisco Xavier Gomes Catão, with regard Subsídios da História de Chorão. And in there, he has mentioned the Alvarez family, but in a footnote, he has actually indicated the family they pertain to in Portugal. So I actually went when I was in. But the thing is, The tricky question. How much of Goans would have intermarried into Portuguese? I mean, it's a complex and controversial issue. I think in the early days, yes, probably there were a lot of intermarriage. Probably that's also the reason why you see some families have got this very fair complexion. There would be that intermarriages with the Portuguese and the Luso connections in the early part of the Portuguese entry here. I do not, because even in my mom's family. My aunt's family, they've got a very fair complexion. They've got the light color eyes and stuff. So definitely there would have been that intermarriage between the Portuguese and the.
But a small percentage.
I would say it's not a very large percentage. Yeah. Like even my own. So I don't think it would be that much. But there would be there is definite. So I was talking to this Alvarez. So. A lot of people, I kind of did a connection to this family in Portugal, which is they're supposed to be descended from. But there were some people coming back and how do you know there's no evidence and all that. I said, but there's this footnote. So in mid-November, I actually went to Tor de Tom and I went to the
that's the archive
and I went to Biblioteca Nacional Português. And there they had some genealogical record which this information is supposed to have been extracted from.
I see.
But the problem is in the early millennium, early part of the previous millennium, there was no concept of surnames. So it was just Anton Gord or Anton Piquen. That was just little. It was based on your attributes, physical attributes or whatever. So there was that concept of surnames only.
Which century?
So I'm talking about 1100 or 1200. So the thing is, there is this connection. So this family is called Leith, and from Leith it became Alvarez.
I see.
So there's that link which can only be established through a DNA testing. So that is one thing. But I've extracted that information.
But yeah, sorry, to come to something of use to readers here. What is your advice to young people who want to build their family tree, young, old, or whatever?
See, first of all, one of the things I would suggest is listen to your elders, because sometimes it might be boring, but at some point later on in your life, you will remember those things. That is one of the big things. Treasure old stuff left behind by your grandparents, ancestors.
Documents, photographs.
Yeah, photographs, black and white photographs. For me, they are priceless. I had seen a photograph of my mother's family, which was taken in Mombasa in the 1930s. My grandmother, it was found in her trunk in Portugal. Sadly, when I got it, it was in such a bad state. I actually brought it to Goa. I thought I'd get it fixed from Lorenz or something, but unfortunately, it was in a very bad state, and I've lost it now. So, but it was a beautiful photo of this two Goan families.
Says so much, no?
They are from Saligao. So they were from Saligao, the Mendonça. One of the ancestors is of our the famous chess player, Luke Mendonça's ancestor. So it was a beautiful picture, but I've lost it. I don't have it, and nobody in the family seems to have a copy. So that is another thing. Family trees. My father-in-law, for instance, had in two separate generations, he had 5 priest uncles. One of them decided to do a piece of work, and he actually pinpointed the family history from 1760, from the village. They were living in Vardin, Murmugao, and there was an epidemic, and I think they moved eventually to Verna. And this is like, if you read it, it's in Portuguese, obviously, but it's like runs into 40 or 50 pages. But it identifies all the family, relatives, connections, the baptisms, births, deaths, all dates are there.
Wow.
It also indicates meetings of, the parish council meetings, what discussions took place there, the fights, the arguments, and this book was almost going to be destroyed. My father-in-law found it and he salvaged it.
So you're looking at history from the perspective of family connections.
It's not only family connections. You learn a lot of things, which also you see. I've seen discussions coming on other media channels, and some of it is all wrong information. Like, I'll give you an example. There was a case where somebody was from a village which is predominantly, there was a particular caste did not exist there. And so what happened, they were discussing about the cemetery having a first class, second class, third class, fourth class kind of thing.
That's more on economics probably, no?
It was more on economic, because exactly what used to happen was at that time, and I only discovered it looking through back to the death records. It's only through there I understood and figured out what was going on, what was this thing. At that time, I think the first class citizens were considered people who were of Portuguese origin, people who were Mishtis, they were considered the first class. Second class were considered all the property landlords, so proprietarios, landlords, they were considered second class. Third class were people who had actually died through by their own hands. So they were suicides and things, jumping into wells and stuff. Third class. Fourth class were generally resen nasids, babies who were born and they just died stillborn kind of thing.
Co-baptism.
And yes, and then there was a fifth class were people who were actually found by the wayside.
I see.
And
unidentified,
they had no distinguishing marks, so nobody knew whether they were Christian, Hindu, Muslim or whatever, so they were put into the fifth class.
I see.
Now, how I discovered the concept was, I came across a death record from Moira of a relative of my mother, and in that it was mentioned that she had been buried in a third class cemetery. And I couldn't figure it out, because what I was told was her husband and the family were known as Orle Batkar in Moira. Now, why would she be buried in a third class? Orle Batkar would mean second class at least. Yeah. So when I went and did a further research into her death, the next thing gave me an indication that she died from submersion, or she drowned in the well. So I asked my mother how she died. So my mother, obviously being a taboo subject, she didn't tell me that first. Yeah. So then I told her, I challenged her, I said, Mom, did she die of suicide? Did she commit suicide? And then she admitted that yes, this
amazing.
Great aunt.
Sometimes we can catch history by its tail because of these kind of misunderstandings and things like that.
And also, as I said, in my own other family, one of my biggest interests was that in my dad's tree, I suddenly discovered a surname called Toscano.
Sure.
No, I didn't know who they were from. Okay. I think, but I don't know. I get this sixth sense or a hunch. I was just sitting at Tudor. I said Toscano. I always considered it more like an Italian kind of Toscano. I just couldn't figure out a Toscano living in Goa. I'd never heard of it prior to that. But something told me to check in Aldona. So that's when I checked, and this is going back to 2009. So I checked into Aldona record and I come across this character called Antnio Toscano. Who was this guy? Yeah. He turned out to be a person who went and told the Portuguese authorities about this conspiracy of the Pintos. And so
I spilled the beans.
Spilled the beans. And I said, what is his connection? Is he connected to me? Because in that story, I came to know that his brother, Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Caitan Toscano, was put to death for treason. So what is his connection to me? So I came back to my father-in-law. He had this thing called Monument Ecclesiastica Goana, which is a book of all the listing of the priests.
Published book?
It's from 1927. It was I've forgotten who the author is, but it gives a list of all the priests ordained from 1750 to 1927. So when there I went and started scrolling down, and I came across some Aldona priests, Toscano priests from Aldona. So I went with the names of the parents were there. So I went to Goa archives at that time, extracted books on the Toscano from 1840, then I went through that. Still, I could not find my connection directly to this man. So then I came across something different, which is called the ordination records of the priests.
Yeah.
In the 1800s, 1800s, to become a priest, you had to go through a process, which included, you had to provide the baptism certificate of the candidate, the marriage certificate of the parents, their baptism certificates, their grandparents'
Wow.
marriage, their parents' thing, and so you could build up to 5 generations straight away. And ironically, I find this ancestor of mine, his brother was was a Fonseca priest from Salvador the Moon.
Okay.
And from that, I got to this point where I found that Antnio Toscano was my 4th great grandfather.
So you have to be careful what you dig up. That's the moral of the story.
It is,
but jokes. I'm just joking. I mean, that's history. That's history.
It
for
is,
you.
but for me, I find it colorful. It's giving my family tree something.
3 dimension.
A 3 dimension. You should not be worried about the worms coming out of the closet.
We can't change. We can't change.
We can't. It is.
But Faust, I want to get to this topic of DNA. That's another ball game in itself. And there's this group of Goans who are actually checking their DNA.
Yes.
And there again, what we find might be very controversial. In a certain sense, because of our expectations today, we might find that we have come from all over the place, probably from the Fertile Crescent or wherever it is, via West Asia. We who talk a lot about being Goans and all of us might have. We are all settlers into Goa because tell us how this goes, DNA.
Well, DNA, the thing is, I've been the first time I got interested with DNA was when I came across The Last Prabhu, which is written by this cousin of mine, Bernard Elvin Souza. So I was intrigued by it, and I think I contacted him at that time. So he had suggested to me that to do the test through a company called Family Tree DNA. So I did my thing through Family Tree DNA, but I was quite disappointed because I was not getting any kind of, the only connections I did get was I got a Hindu connection.
In Goa?
Not Goa, but to Kolhapur.
I see.
Yeah, so I had this Hindu connection which kind of answered a question which my mother used to tell me as a child, that one branch of her family from Kurtori, to avoid conversion, they ran away to Kolhapur.
Surname?
She didn't have the surname.
Okay.
But apparently one room in their house, their ancestral house in Kurtori, has been kept the way it is for them, for their spiritual, when they come for their puja or whatever, they come to that room to do it. And that's what my mother told. Whether it's true or false, I have not been able to establish that. But she used to tell me. So that kind of, I contacted the person, but I never got a response. Okay. But what I did find interesting was I came across 3 or 4 instances of Mangalorians who actually shared a similar DNA to me. They were Mangalorians.
That's true.
So at that time, I kind of, because I was not getting any interest, I kind of lost interest in the DNA side of it. But then subsequent to that, I came across genie.com was acquired by a company called MyHeritage, which is, they're all based in Israel. And
also into DNA testing.
They are into, so they had a DNA testing thing. So I got a test done through them. And this time I convinced my wife to do the same. So my wife did a DNA test and myself. So we both did a DNA test. And the net result was I get a match that we are both cousins. But going back 4 generations. Okay. And the irony is, she is another descendant of Antnio Toscano. So the Rangels are another branch. I'm the Fonseca branch, they're the Rangel branch. And there's a 3rd branch which goes to the Menezes from Divar.
So that cost you $100, and they tell you also who could possibly be connected to the same ancestors.
Yes.
They tell you when your ancestors could have migrated into Goa, through which route.
Yes.
And what kind of chromosomes you have.
No, they do give you all that information.
Okay.
But the one thing which is very, very clear in my DNA, it shows me that 100% I do not have any foreign influences. My entire DNA is from Maharashtra right up till Karnataka. There's nothing, and I'm to Andhra Pradesh. So I'm only from my
except us guys who have come ourselves generations back from somewhere else.
Yes, but for the last probably 1,000 years, I'm from this region. So it kind of gives you pinpoints your exact connection. But there are some who still fantasize that, we've got Portuguese blood and all, which is fine.
That's out of ignorance, but
that is fair. Some people do. Some people have proven it.
Yeah.
Like I have one of my aunt. She has Damau connection. She has 13%, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But in my case, it's 100%. It's showing me from this region. I'm not nowhere else. But what I do find is the community which is very much into this DNA is the Mangalorean community. They are not averse to having it done. They are in Canada, America, even in Mangalore. They are very, in this field, they are very advanced. And many of them, intriguingly enough, I've been discovering lately, they are from Aldona, Nationala, that area, that belt.
Yeah.
Divar, that whole they're coming from that area,
which was the border international boundary in those days, no? So
in those
probably
days. And I'm also finding that even though my ancestors are generally shown to be Asagaon and all, but I've got a lot of roots in Aldona, for instance, Nashnola, because I think that branch went to British India in the late 1700s. They established themselves, came back, and then they moved to Seoli and places like that, where they built, big different kind of houses and stuff.
Of course, we are running short of time, but with you, I could go on, Faust, for so long, because you have so much to tell us, and your story is so fascinating, and everyone would be interested. But one last question: how do people contact you if they want to? Some email or something like that?
See, my contact, I am very I use email and WhatsApp. And my my number in the UK is the UK code is 44, and it's 07791 181 489, and email it's Fausto de Sa 69@hotmail.com. So it's Fausto, not Faust. It's the O has to be there, otherwise. So it's just that I'm if I can help, I go all for it. The thing is, what I find the most difficult is that I cannot get some of the information. If I could get hands onto it, I would do miracles with it. But it's far away for me because it's in Goa.
We need the links. We need people here linking up with people like you who know the field so
well.
Yes.
So the thing is, like even in Canada, UK, I think there are people who are willing to sponsor youngsters who are looking for jobs, in between jobs or something.
But it's so iffy, that people don't want to take on this work, because if you go to the archive, there's no guarantee you'll find the answers.
No, the thing is, you have to have the patience is a very important thing. You need to have patience. You have to use a little bit of common sense and understanding. A lot of people give up on the first hurdle. If you can't get it through baptism, go through marriage, go through a death record, because through that you can proceed further. Okay. But a lot of people, they say, oh, I can't find. Try going to your mother's village. If it's not the father, go to your mother's village. There are ways. It's just how you think. There are people who contact me. They're saying, oh, I'm struggling to find my thing. And I use the internet, and within minutes I've given them some kind of answer so they can proceed.
I know I said last question, but it's too tempting to say not to say this, but I think your mom and my mom were friends in the 60s.
The thing is, my mother, as I told you, she lived in Panjim. Somewhere in 1960, she decided to go to Portugal to do her studies. In those days, she was not very academic, so she went to do the course feminine or whatever, so like hat making, dress making, home sciences. So she had gone to Portugal, and I think at that time she had a boyfriend who I think they were very close in the. But when she landed there, it turned out he was married to a Portuguese. He was a doctor. He had married a Portuguese nurse. So anyway, she was there. She came back in 1961, 3 weeks before the liberation, whatever. Her thing was invasion,
annexation, whatever.
Yeah. So hers was always because she was very pro-Portuguese. So anyway, she came back, and what happened is she then took the opportunity of going and teaching in Kalangut. So she was teaching in Don Bosco school. I think Father Salj was the headmaster. Had just started. So she started teaching there in the primary section, and she and her mother and sister Marina, they took up accommodation in a house just opposite tourist hostel, which used to belong, I think, to the Bancal family, the Bancal Fernandez family. I think they owned that thing. They were the tenants. So what used to happen is people who used to come from Africa or people who had come from Bombay or whatever wanted to go to Kalangut beach. the first port of call would be my grandmother's place in Kalangut, where they'd keep their luggage, their shoes, their baggage, whatever, go to the beach, have a great time. So a lot of people knew my mother from that, they used to go and spend time. So they knew people, all the Africanders, everybody knew her from that. And then, of course, my mother was born in Saligaon, Maidadiyo's church. She was baptized there. Her father was buried there. So, and then his ashes are in the niche over there. But so these villages had a lot of
proximity.
No, they had a lot of affection to her. She loved her days in Goa. The stories she could tell me were amazing.
It's amazing the way you connect, the family trees with a wider history of Goa. But thanks, Faust, for giving us so much inputs. Really looking forward to you forming more connections with people here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Fred.